Hello, everybody. Let's see. It's 10:20 p.m. I'm a little bit late because the criminals put me to sleep. The control freaks, the lops, mops, cops, wops. Hope everybody's doing well. I hope you received this notification that I'm live. Yes, I am still alive, contrary to what the criminals want to do. Hello, everybody. It's Saturday night, October 19, 2024. I'll wait for people to get some notifications there. Tonight, I'm going to read a little bit from a book. It's actually an older book. It's called Stopping a Stalker. Who and what are stalkers? we have no idea what those creatures are, right? And it's believe it or not, this book is a cop's guide to making the system work for you by Captain Robert L. Snow, New York. Let me get the date on this. It's quite old. 1998. Book 1998 by Robert L. Snow, Stopping a Stalker. So this is Lorraine Alternative Homesteading. I'll wait to see who else comes into the chat. I'm sure it'll take a while for you to receive notifications. It's 10:22 p.m. Let me see. Maybe I'll type a link in the comments section there. Hello, everybody. I'll wait for some people to come in. I'm going to read maybe a couple of chapters from this book, Stopping a Stalker. It's written by a cop, Robert L. Snow, 1998. So, of course, it's a little bit older, but it's from the perspective of an officer back then. We can apply some of this to what we experience now, although people have become a lot more depraved since to 1998. Hi, Battle for Your Brain. Welcome, welcome. What time is it by you? Oh, those are cute little emojis. Let me see. I should pull up. Let's see. I'll wait for a few more people to come into the chat. I'm a few minutes late. I apologize for that, but the criminals, they like to mess me up, so they knock me out while I'm sitting at the laptop here. So I've been watching a lot of videos about North Carolina. I mean, it's really, really bad. They're not telling us really what's going on there. Huge land grab. Horrible, horrible situation. (8:23 p.m.) Oh, you're in Utah. Oh, okay. So you're 2 hour time. You're 2 hour earlier. So it says that there are 4 people hanging out. Sometimes it takes people a while to get in the chat. Sometimes they can't get into the chat. Hi, Paul. How you doing? Welcome, welcome. I'm going to read a little bit from a book called Stopping a Stalker by Robert L. Snow. I actually read a little bit about this maybe a year or so ago, maybe a year and a half ago, on my channel. He's a former police officer, but this is back like in 1998. So, it was very different then, but he's discussing the mindset of a stalker, the psychology behind stalking, and of course, his experience as an officer. So he wrote this book. He says that writing a book about a subject as complex as stalking could never be done without help from many people. He wanted to thank his editor, who saw the need for this book and acquired it. He wanted to thank his agent. Naturally, he received advice and information from many people who work with stalkers and stalking victims, and he wants to thank everyone who assisted him. He says, I've seen many cases of stalking during my 30 years as a police officer. I have never experienced the long-term fear and terror that accompany it. Therefore, I want to express my deepest gratitude to the stalking victims who opened up their souls to me and let me see exactly what stalking does to a person. Only through their very candid descriptions and recollections was I able to visualize what it must feel like to be a stalking victim. I hope they feel that I have given a true and accurate picture of their victimization. Stalking in America. So some of the contents of this book are stalking in America, who and what are stalkers, intimate partner stalking, casual acquaintance stalking, stranger stalking, juvenile stalking, celebrity stalking, cause stalking, which is, revenge stalking, electronic stalking. See, he's even talking about this back in 1998. Serial stalking, unintentional and third party victims of stalking, physiological and psychological effects of stalking, how stalkers get their information and how to stop them, the criminal justice system in stalking, what can victims do, what can society do, and then a final thought, and then references and an index. So I'm going to read a little bit about it. But before I get started, please remember to hit the thumbs up. It helps the channel grow, get the message out there. And what I've noticed is, because the lives tend to, go on for, more than an hour, sometimes 2 hours. And we end up talking about so many things that TheYouTube ends up combing through the live. So initially, they're monetizing it. And then after I upload it and TheYouTube get their little paws on it, they usually demonetize it because of some words that I've said, some words. And actually, as I'm waiting for people to enter, I pulled up just YouTube, and there is a video, and I want to watch this. It's from 9 days ago. Why every content creator is at risk. People are losing their channels, and it's an attorney. It's the creator's attorney who's having this conversation with Think Media Podcast. Creators need to know things like saying things that are gross, that's not really transforming a video into something different, whoever content that you're using. A lot of people will claim other people's information as their own and get a strike. Let's see. I'm reading, like, what are the most common legal mistakes? Let's see. So this woman is Tyler Chow, who's the creator's attorney, formerly a Hollywood attorney, and her YouTube channel is crushing it. So you can go check it out. Lots of insights on these legal issues. But I've noticed this with a lot of people, like even the really big channels are getting strikes because there are certain topics they don't want you to talk about. And then what I've noticed, and I don't know, maybe you've noticed this too. Like I watch a lot of other people's videos, a lot of targeted people's videos. And I'm kind of shocked that they use clips from movies and music and other videos and stuff, and they never give credit back to the originator. I'm always curious, like, how are they able to get away with that? It's like, even when I read something from Quora, I'll put the person's name down there, put the date that I retrieved it, where I've located it. Um, and I've noticed that sometimes people have even taken my content and have not asked. Like, it's like, I don't mind if you share the content or, reuse it. It depends on how you reuse it, but just ask. But when people just randomly take stuff and then create it as their own, it's not cool. But I don't know. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the chat. I'm going to start reading this chapter, Stalking in America, but let me just take a sip of my orange juice. Orange juice and cranberry juice. Cranberry juice is so bitter. Stalking in America. So I'm not going to go into, like, he gives some examples of what stalking is. Like, he discusses a stalking case. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. Undoubtedly, one of the greatest benefits of living in America is the freedom our citizens enjoy. Freedom to move about without restriction, congregate where and with whomever we want to choose, to preach whatever we believe in, and say whatever's on our minds. Well, actually, that's not true anymore. Fast forward to 2024. Unfortunately, it's these very freedoms that allow stalkers like Mike Hilburn to harass, intimidate, and terrorize others, and for years prohibited the police from doing much about his behavior until it was too late. It is the freedoms enjoyed by people like Mark Hilburn that force others to become terrified prisoners in their own homes, afraid to venture out. They're trapped, knowing that stalkers are out there somewhere watching and waiting for them. Until very recently, stalking fell into the gray area of perhaps being morally wrong, but not really against the law, as much of stalking involved appears to be constitutionally protected behavior. Fortunately, this has now changed with the recent passage of anti-stalking laws. But what does the new crime of stalking encompass? Each state defines it a little differently. In Pennsylvania, stalking is defined as engaging in a course of conduct or repeatedly committing acts towards another person, including following the person without proper authority, under circumstances which demonstrate either of the following: an intent to place the person in a reasonable fear of bodily injury, or an intent to cause substantial emotional distress to the person. In Florida, stalking is defined as any person who willingly, maliciously, and repeatedly follows or harasses another person, or who harasses another person and makes a credible threat with the intent to place that person in a reasonable fear of death or bodily injury. And I just want to make sure, is everybody hearing me? Can you hear me? Because now I see that there are 9 people. Please remember to hit the thumbs up when you come into the chat. Is everybody hearing me? In Indiana, stalking is defined as knowing or an intentional course of conduct involving repeated or continuing harassment of another person. This conduct must be such that it would cause a reasonable person, and did in fact cause the victim to feel terrorized, frightened, intimidated, or threatened. In light of the untimely death of Princess Diana, who on August 31, 1997, died in a car crash while being chased by several members of the paparazzi, many readers may wonder why the police cannot arrest the paparazzi, who often act more like stalkers than reporters or photographers, before such an incident can occur. While I'm not intimately acquainted with the laws of France, where the unfortunate incident involving Princess Diana took place, in the United States, the paparazzi usually hide behind one of 2 defenses. Their first defense is that their actions do not meet the requirements of the various state laws against stalking. In truth, their conduct, while certainly reprehensible, usually doesn't legally constitute stalking because, although they certainly harass their victims, they don't terrorize or put them in fear of bodily harm, even though this was the end result in the case involving Princess Diana. Well, that's a whole nother story, right? That was definitely a hit. I mean, she was like being gang stalked because of her boyfriend. The second defense used by those members of the paparazzi who appear to skirt close to the statutes against stalking is that their actions are protected under the First Amendment. In cases involving the paparazzi, often the only avenue of relief available for victims is a restraining order, which the late Jackie O. Onassis was forced to obtain in order to stop a particularly aggressive photographer. Putting the legal jargon and the issue of the paparazzi aside, to truly understand the crime of stalking as ordinary individuals that are likely to experience it, put yourself in the following scenario. Oh, and for all those perps that are listening, put yourself in the following scenario. A person you may or may not know watches your home day and night. Whenever you leave the home, the person follows you wherever you go, sitting for hours on end outside wherever you've gone, including your workplace, friends' home, shopping malls. This person calls you on the telephone, both at work or at home, dozens of times every day. During the calls, this person makes sure that you're aware that he or she knows where you've been, who you've talked to, and what you're wearing. You change your telephone number to an unlisted number, but somehow the person discovers the new number and calls continue. Letters and messages from this person pour into your home and workplace by the dozens. You find that this person has been asking family members, friends, and business acquaintances about you, apparently compiling reams of information from any source he or she can gain access to, legally or not. So this is the old-time fusion centers. At first, the person claims during the calls and letters that his or her actions are out of love for you. But after a while, as you continue to refuse the person's demands for an intimate relationship, things turn dark and sinister. Telephone calls and letters become obscene, threatening, or bizarre, and you hear such things as, quote, soon we'll be in heaven together, unquote. You find your property vandalized. A family pet is killed. Family members are threatened and their property is vandalized. One day you find that the person has been inside your home. Now you feel terrorized. The threats become more than just words. Every time your telephone rings, you jump. Every time you hear a noise at night, your heart stops. You're certain it's the person coming for you. Soon your appetite disappears, as does your ability to sleep. Then you have trouble concentrating and begin having problems at your job. You now realize that you're a prisoner. You no longer control your own life. The stalker does. You can no longer go wherever you want or do whatever you want. You must now make any plans or life decisions based on the stalker's actions. Your life is no longer yours. The stalker may go on for months, even years. You may eventually be assaulted or even a victim of murder, suicide. Well, for they too, it's not the MURDER word. This is for educational purposes only. I'm just reading a book. This is what stalking is. Stalking is not a crime of love or desire, but an attempt of domination. It's about power and control, says Karen Phillips, director of the Project Assist Legal Aid of Western Missouri. Stalkers keep someone in line by frightening them. According to an article in Essence magazine, similar to the way a jackal tracks and kills its prey, human stalkers wage a campaign of terror against their victims, and often the hunt ends only when the stalker moves on to another victim or unalives them. Welcome to the chat, everybody. I see there are 11 people here now. Please remember to hit the thumbs up. Stalking will likely become the crime of the 21st century. Those of us who study crime trends see that it's already well along the path, followed by similar crimes that have risen from obscurity to become nationwide plagues. And this book was written in 1998 by Robert L. Snow, who's a retired captain in the police force. Although probably in existence for as long as humankind, stalking has only recently become recognized by law enforcement officials as a serious problem. Well, now fast forward to 2024, and they're involved. They're participating in the act of stalking, right? Or they have their informants doing it on their behalf. It's a brand new era, says Sergeant Bob Drago of the Broward County, Florida Police Department. Many people just don't understand the severity of it. Lieutenant John Lane, head of the Los Angeles Police Department's Threat Management Unit, which investigates stalking complaints, adds, "We just put a label on it in recent years. It's like domestic violence or child abuse were 10 years ago. Both have been around a long time, but law enforcement saw them as family matters." Many people in law enforcement believe stalking will become the next in vogue crime in America because we're a nation of copycat criminals. Whenever a spectacular crime occurs that generates large amounts of media attention, similar crimes quickly follow. Examples are plentiful for anyone who doubts this assertion. Following the 1971 hijacking of Northwest Orient Flight 305, aircraft hijackings became the crime to commit because this initial crime received unbelievable levels of news coverage, raising the perpetrator to near legend status. Hundreds of copycat aircraft hijackings occurred over the next decade. However, once the authorities learned how to deal successfully with these hijackings, declined dramatically, and in the 1980s, hostage taking became the in vogue crime because the initial crimes received such intense media coverage. And after this, mass unalivings at fast food restaurants and other public places moved to center stage. Well, we all know as targeted people what that is. Those are all setups. Those were created. Like the crimes above, stalking has recently begun to receive extensive press coverage. The publicity can propel a perpetrator from a nobody into an instant media celebrity, as it did with hijackers, hostage takers, and the mass murderers. So, the lops, mops, cops, pops, the predators on patrol, the criminals on patrol, the morons on patrol, the losers on patrol. They're propelled into celebrity status. They were nobody before they became a stalker, and now they're somebody. Stalking is not a joke. It's terrorism, says John Stein, Deputy Director for the National Organization for Victim Assistance in Washington, D.C. To feel that you can't get away from this person and that you're at risk no matter where you go is tantamount to living in Beirut. Stalking is now illegal in all 50 states. It's defined in most jurisdictions as a repeated pattern of harassment that presents a threat to the victim. Although the laws vary from state to state, the majority require more than just one act, that the victims feel threatened by these acts, and that there is an intent on the part of the stalker to instill fear. Of course, how this fear is instilled is up to the interpretation. It can be something obvious like threatening notes or messages, or something symbolic, such as dead flowers or animal carcasses left on the doorsteps. Sometimes fear can be instilled by looks or gestures. Yeah, while stalking is now illegal in the 50 states, the laws against it did not appear before 1990. The first state to pass anti-stalking law was California. And it was passed after a stalker, unalived actress Rebecca Schaefer, and other stalkers had harassed, threatened, and finally unalived four more women in Southern California within a short time after her unaliving. Because anti stalking laws have only been around for a few years, most law enforcement agencies, prosecutors, and judges don't have much experience in enforcing them. So much of the protection that victims need is simply not available yet. Now, mind you, this book is written in 1998. Okay, so I'm going to fast forward a little bit. He says, since I began writing this book, I have often thought about what it must feel like to be a stalking victim. To experience the uncertainty and terror of it. I've tried many times to imagine living with this intense fear for months or even years, and then only to have it get worse and worse. For those of us who have never experienced stalking, it is difficult to imagine or comprehend how people can function under this level of stress, how they can get through their daily lives knowing that there is an obsessed and likely dangerous person watching and following them at any moment. Most stalkers, the police find, are just as obsessed as the ex-husband of an incident above, either by obtaining the love and attention of their victims or with winning them back. Now they say, again, 1998, because stalking is such a new crime, it wasn't until recently not reported as a specific offense on the national crime statistics kept by my favorite Bureau of Instigation. Of course, they wouldn't keep the statistics. Even back in the 1990s, they were already participating back then. Let me fast forward here. A quick measure of just how prevalent stalking may be in America comes from the New York Telephone Company, which says it receives 6,000 reports of threatening phone calls and 9,000 reports of obscene phone calls. Integral parts of stalking every month. The emotional toll is unbelievable. The victims who call them are scared and often hysterical. That is 15,000 calls a month from just one of the many telephone companies in the United States. And no one knows how many victims do not report the threatening or obscene calls. So, again, this book was written in 1998. Let me just fast forward here. Stalking, as shown by the incidents related up to this point, is a crime on a continuum that can run from constant annoyance to harassment to threatening behavior to assault and homicide. National statistics show that 90% of the women unalived every year by a current or former spouses were stalked by these men before they were unalived. However, those stalkers who ended up becoming murderers often didn't start out planning to do that, but they usually began at the low end of the continuum and worked their way up in seriousness. Unfortunately, no one knows which stalkers will stay at the low end and which ones will move up the violence continuum. And because of this, any stalking, even on a minor level, should be taken seriously. If ignored, stalking can quickly grow to dangerous levels. And this is generally how it should be treated. But we all know, as targeted people, that our stalkers, that commonly known as gang stalkers, cause stalking, vigilante stalkers, neighborhood harassment stalkers, criminals on patrol, is sanctioned. They're receiving funding from the Department of Justice for the COPS program, Citizens on Patrol. Meanwhile, the citizens on patrol are creating more crime than existed before. They're the ones that are speeding down the road. They're the ones that are headlighting people. They're the ones that are cutting people off. They're the ones that are screaming out their windows. They're the ones that leave trash on your property. They're the ones that are harassing you, honking their horns and stuff. They're the ones stealing your pets. But nobody's reporting those into the crime statistics. Interestingly, scientists who have recently begun studying stalkers find that their behavior is actually just a deviant variance of acceptable behavior. Stalking is an outgrowth, they find, of the way male and female relationships are viewed in our society. People, for example, often say no to others whom they actually want to have a relationship with, not because they don't like the individuals, but because they don't want to appear to be too easy to win. And he says, I and most people have had the experience of learning that a person we believe didn't even know we were alive or seemed to show at least a bit of interest in us actually was very interested in us. In a book called To Have or to Harm, author Lyndon Gross relates the case of a man brought to a trial after months of pestering a woman for a date. The man handled his own defense and asked the woman of the jury and those present in the court how many of them had initially said no to a man they actually wanted to date. The large show of hands eventually won him an acquittal. Isn't that interesting? Okay, let me fast forward here. Another possible explanation of stalking behavior relates to the fact that men and women view social situations very differently. Men and women in a study viewed films of neutral and professional interaction between a man and a woman, and then were asked to describe what they believed happened during the observed interaction. Men often, more often than women, saw sexual clues or connotations in the interactions, and more often reported that they thought the women's behavior was a sexual come on. Regardless of how we view situations, if we look at our own experiences, most of us can understand a little of how stalkers feel, even though we abhor their actions. Anyone who has ever been in love with another person knows how important being close to that person can be, how being around the special person is intoxicating and exhilarating, and how receiving love in return can be euphoric. But those who do not want to receive the same feelings in return know how heartbreaking the experience can be, and still we recover and move on. Stalkers, however, don't recover and they don't move on. They stay fixated on the person to the exclusion of everything else. Stalkers make it their life's work to follow and harass a person who doesn't want them, unrealistically believing that such behavior will eventually win the person's love. Finally, when they discover that they can't be the object of the person's love, they settle for being the object of the person's attention, even though this attention is born in fear. Very often, when the stalkers do realize that they are not going to obtain the person's love, the quest turns ugly, brutal, and occasionally deadly. Hi, whoever's in the chat, hello, hello, welcome. It's Saturday night, October 19th, 2024. I'm reading a little bit from a book called Stalking in America, 1998 book, written by former police captain Robert L. Snow. Who and what are stalkers? Stalkers are obviously not normal people. Although many stalkers are worse and have mental problems that demand immediate institutionalization, others have problems that demand, at minimum, long term psychiatric help. Almost all stalkers have some type of mental or emotional problem. Oh, no, no, right, guys? Come on. That can't be true. Like, my neighbors aren't mentally ill. Stalkers will go across town, country, or even different continents in order to continue their stalking. Stable people simply do not continue in the face of years of rejection to pursue someone. It's not normal. None of the people who engage in stalking behavior are normal individuals, says Dr. Park Dietz. There's something wrong with each of them. Stalkers, no matter what or how bad their mental disorder, can usually be sorted into one of three major groupings. Okay, so there's a simple obsession stalkers. These stalkers have previously been involved in intimate relationships with their victims. Often, the stalking victims have attempted to call off the relationship, but the stalkers simply refuse to accept this. Although this category of stalker may not have serious mental disorders that demand immediate institutionalization, they do suffer from personality disorders, including being emotionally immature, extremely jealous and insecure, suffer from low self esteem, and quite often feel powerless without the relationship. So, guys, your stalkers feel powerless without you. They need you because they feel so insecure and they're jealous of you and they're so immature. They've got a low self esteem, so they have to stalk you. According to The Terror of the Batterer Stalking by Michael Lindsay, the injury can be real or perceived, leaving the individual feeling devastated, annihilated, betrayed, and abandoned. Stalkers often express the belief that everything for which they have worked for has been stripped from them, creating a vast emptiness that is unbearable. So when I finally move from Kentucky, my neighbors are going to feel so empty. The emptiness is going to be unbearable. And so will their pocketbooks. While reconciliation is the goal, stalkers believe they must have a specific person back or they will not survive. Stalkers of former spouses and intimate partners, and as researchers have found, are often domineering and abusive to their partners during the relationship and use this domination as a way to bolster their own low self-esteem. The control the abusers exert over their partners gives them a feeling of power they can't find anywhere else. Because of this, they try to control every aspect of their partners' lives. The abuser's worst fear becomes losing the people over whom they have control. So, guys, your stalkers, they're afraid to lose control over you. Oh my God, what will they be without you and me? Nobody. When they realize this fear as the relationship finally does end, the stalker suddenly believes that their lives are destroyed. Their total identity and feelings of self worth are tied up in the power experienced through their domineering and abusive relationship with you. Without this control, they feel that they will have no self worth and no identity. They will become nobodies. And in desperation, they begin stalking, trying to regain their partners and the basis for their power. It is this total dependence on their partners for identity and feelings of self worth that makes these stalkers so very dangerous. They will often go through any length and stop at nothing to get their partners back. And if they can't have the people over whom they can exert dominance and control, that's my alarm, sorry guys, their lives are truly not worth living. Unfortunately, along with becoming suicidal, they often want to unalive their intimate partners who have left them. Stalking doesn't always begin with violence or trying to terrorize. It usually starts with, "Hey, can I just talk to you?" said FBI agent James Wright, supervising agent for the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime in Quantico, Virginia. He wants her back, and she won't come back. Everything escalates from there, and sometimes he snaps and assaults or unalives her. In his mind, he makes a decision. If I can't have you, no one else will. Typically, a woman beater tries to hide his dependence on women with macho displays. When he says, "If I can't have you, nobody can," he's attempting to cover his fear that she'll meet another man and leave him. Far too often, the police find that these stalkers follow through on their threats, unaliving their victims, and then many times taking their own lives. For them, uh, not being here anymore is better than having to face the humiliation of the stalking victims leaving them for someone else, and the humiliation of having to face their own powerlessness. Then there are the love obsession stalkers. So, guys, do you think that your stalkers are obsessively in love with you? These are individuals who become obsessed or fixated on a person with whom they've had no intimate relation or close relationship to. But they're in love with you nevertheless. The victim may have been a friend, a business acquaintance, a person they met only once, or even a complete stranger, or like a neighbor stalker, cause stalker, vigilante stalker. One stalker, for example, met his victim when she gave him a ride in her car after learning that he was headed towards the same direction that she was. He didn't see her again for 31 years. The woman became a stalking victim when the man found her through an obituary notice for her mother. Once he located her, the man began a relentless pursuit of the victim. When arrested by the police, the man had in his possession 62 presents that he purchased over the years since he had last seen the woman. Now, this is nuts. For every Christmas and birthday during the 31 years, he also had a set of wedding rings, a bottle of champagne, and a pair of toasting glasses. I mean, this guy is delusional. He's living in a fantasy land. Oh my goodness. These love obsession stalkers believe that a special and often mystical relationship exists between them and their victims, and any contact with the victim becomes a positive reinforcement of this relationship. And even the slightest wavering of the victims from an absolute no is seen as an invitation to continue the pursuit. These stalkers often imagine that they and their victims, whom they have met, may have never met, that they're married. They've had an affair or had a child together. Love obsession stalkers will often read sexual meanings into neutral responses. Yet the victims usually have nothing to do with them. And these stalkers sometimes resort to collecting in-depth personal information about the victims to give them a feeling of intimacy with the victims. These stalkers are often loners with an emotional void in their lives. They're chronic failures in social and sexual relationships through young adulthood, and they may be a necessary predisposing experience for obsessional followers. And let me just fast forward. Okay, so then there are the other stalkers. Some stalkers harass their victims not out of love, but out of hate. Occasionally, stalking becomes a method of revenge for some misdeed against the stalker, real or imagined. Stalking can also be used as a means of protest. This is the smallest group, but this type of stalking for revenge and protest can be especially dangerous. For example, there have been several unalivings in recent years by stalkers at, I can't really say this, at those clinics where they unalive kiddos that are not born yet. And a number of okay, I'm going to have to pass through this. I'm going to just fast forward here. I'm going to fast forward here to some of the traits that all stalkers possess. Okay, stalkers will not take no for an answer. They refuse to believe that a victim is not interested in them or will not rekindle a relationship. They often believe that the victim really does love them, but just doesn't want to know it and needs to be pushed into realizing it. Most stalkers have little sense of self or identity, so if the object of their desire rejects them, they have nothing, no life, no self to fall back on, and consequently, as long as they continue pursuing their victims, the stalkers can convince themselves that they haven't been completely rejected yet. Number two, stalkers display obsessive personality. They're not just interested in, but totally obsessed with the person they're pursuing. Their every waking thought centers on the victim, and every plan the stalker has for the future involves the victim. Friends and coworkers wonder whether a person's interest has become an obsession, would evaluate their answer to a certain question. Is the energy involved disproportionate to the positive return? In other words, is the person totally involved in and completely overwhelmed with pursuing someone who has no or never will have any interest in him or her? Well, I'm telling you flat out, I have no interest in my moronic neighbors, but they keep following me all over the place. I have no interest. And I'm sure you guys have no interest in yours either. Along with obsessive thinking, stalkers display other psychological or personality problems and disorders. They may suffer from erotomania, paranoia, schizophrenia, and delusional thinking, but of course, they project all of that stuff onto us. They tend to have rigid personalities and maladaptive styles, said Professor Reed Malloy. These personality disorders in themselves are very stable and not treatable. And although there are drugs to treat certain specific mental disorders, stalkers, when given the choice, seldom continue with their medication or treatment. And number three, stalkers are above average in intelligence and are usually smarter than run of the mill person with mental problems. I don't know, I beg to differ. I definitely beg to differ on this. They will often go to great and even ingenious lengths to obtain information about their victims or to find victims who have secretly moved. Stalkers have been known to hack into computers, tap telephone lines, take jobs at the public utilities to allow them access to the victim's information, and they'll even travel thousands of miles and spend thousands of dollars to gain information about or find their victims. It's sort of like, when targeted people move from state to state and they follow you or they still follow you. In addition, stalkers many times use their intelligence to throw others off their trail. Although many victims may feel that they have been selected at random by the stalkers and immediately approached, this isn't always so. Stalkers, being above average in intelligence, often make elaborate plans even before the stalking begins. Well, we know that before our harassment begins, we've been followed around. Stalkers want somebody they know that they can control and manipulate with fear and intimidation. It's easier to go after someone who seems safe to pursue than someone who you think will reject you. Number four, most stalkers don't have any relationship outside of the one that they're trying to reestablish or the one that have imagined exists between them and their victim. Because they're usually loners, stalkers become desperate to obtain this relationship. Many stalkers were deprived of their parents for some time when they were children. And early on, some of these individuals had a disturbance in parenting. They may have been separated earlier than 5 years of age, and this helps to explain the difficulty in forming attachments. Number five, stalkers don't display the discomfort or anxiety that people should naturally feel in certain situations. Normal people would be ordinarily embarrassed to be caught following another person, going through their trash, looking for information about them, leaving obscene notes or other inappropriate behavior displayed by stalkers. Stalkers, however, don't see this as inappropriate behavior. but only a means to gain the person's love or personal information or money or creative ideas. Number 6, stalkers often suffer from low self-esteem and they feel they must have a relationship with the victim in order to have any self-worth. Some of this fame and importance will transfer to them. Usually, you have an individual with very low self esteem and who has to prop up that self esteem by relating to someone they've put on a pedestal. Oh, that's sort of like my neighbor, that's Scarlett, who keeps talking about that her son in law, the sheriff. The sheriff is not her son in law, according to a local person that posted on my under the comment section. Usually, you have an individual with very little self esteem and who has to prop up that self esteem by relating to someone they've put on a pedestal. If that relationship breaks up with further damages their own self esteem, they have to reinstitute that relationship. Dr. Carrie Dixon says preoccupations with other people almost always involve someone with a weak social skills and low self esteem. Number 7, few stalkers can see how their actions are hurting others. They display other sociopathic thinking that they cannot learn from experience, and they don't believe society's rules apply to them. Most stalkers don't think they're really threatening, intimidating, or even stalking someone else. They think they're simply trying to show the victims that they're the right one for them. However, to the victims of stalking, it's like a prolonged, RAPE. Hi. Hello. Welcome to the chat. Welcome, HM. I'm reading a book. I'm reading a chapter in the book, Stopping a Stalker by Robert L. Snow. It's an older book from 1998. And he's a retired captain of the police department. So he's got a different perspective on it. Of course, back in 1998, they weren't talking so much about what's going on now because a lot of this harassment started after the Patriot Act was enacted, after 9/11. Stalkers many times have a mean streak and will become violent when frustrated. How violent? Often deadly, according to Charlotte Garner. When informed by the police that her husband, Joseph Garner, had been arrested, for 7 years since their divorce, Charlotte had been living in constant terror of him. He stalked her, beat her, threatened to sneak into her house, threatened to unalive her and her 3 children, and then take his own life. Charlotte had seen Joseph sneaking around her house and going through her trash a number of times. And in 1995, the Indianapolis police arrested him after he allegedly stabbed his 76-year-old father. Oh my God, I'm not even going to repeat this. It was pretty gruesome, very gruesome. So he goes into explaining some anecdotes about cases that he was involved in overseeing and stuff. He writes, all stalkers are potentially violent. Some of them are blatantly psychotic. Most of them are paranoid and possessive, very insecure, and very dangerous. Although the few statistics we've managed to gather in the last few years on stalking show that the majority of cases do not end up in unaliving or grave bodily injury, although every year victims should never brush aside this possibility. Victims of stalking should never take the crime lightly, no matter who the stalkers are or how close they become emotionally. Look carefully at the traits listed below and be wary if someone seems to fit these. So listen to these traits. They won't take no for an answer. They have an obsessive personality, above average intelligence, no or few personal relationships, lack of embarrassment or discomfort at actions, low self esteem, sociopathic thinking, and has a mean streak. Many readers will likely believe that the traits listed above apply only to people occupying the bottom edge of society's social media stratum, the uneducated or the unsophisticated. However, this is not so. Stalkers come from any class and from any background. According to an article in Essence magazine, stalkers can be rich, poor, professional people, or laborers. But whatever their qualities, there's one characteristic stalkers share, and that is persistence. Even as a police officer who has seen the worst side of humanity and consequently seldom shocked, I am still surprised by the large number of people with a considerable stake in society who become stalkers. I'm amazed by the number of people with tremendous amount to lose who throw away everything and become stalkers. So let me fast forward here because then he goes into certain incidences when he was on the police force. It's a lot of storytelling here. Interesting, the crime of stalking also knows no age limits. I don't know, like I said, I'm in my 60s. I know that there are a lot of women that are being stalked. They're in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s. It's absolutely absurd. Stalkers come from every background and every level of society. Including their stalking victims. And even though much of the stalking appears to be committed by individuals who claim to care and love for the victims, far too many times stalking ends up in violence and unaliving. And for this reason, all incidents of stalking should be taken seriously for what they are: crimes committed by disturbed individuals. Yes, they are disturbed, that's for sure. So I'm going to end reading because I'm a little tired from reading. Um, let's see if you guys have anything that you want to talk about. Let's see. I get a bookmark here. 1 second. Okay. So how's everybody doing? Do you have any questions or comments or topics that you want to discuss? If anybody has a testimony that they'd like to share, a written testimony, I'm happy to read it on the channel. I would like to eventually set up a Zoom meeting and maybe interview some people face to face. The only issue is, there are time zone differences, and for me, especially going into the winter months, it gets a little bit more difficult here. Although the birds are going into bed earlier, which is good. So anyway, I see like 11 people here. Please remember to hit the thumbs up. So let's see, what else can we discuss here? I'm going to just pull up some mail that I received. Let's see if we can discuss some of this stuff. Let me see. There was I received an email. 1 second. One second here. I wanted to mention something. I heard that Amazon laid off a whole bunch of people, and they were going to get robots to replace some of the humans. And I know somebody right now that started a new job, and they're working. Oh, okay, that would be good. That would be very good. Now, let me just mention the thing about the Zoom calls. I will probably be setting up, a free one, and the free one only allows you to record like 45 minutes at a time, but you can record multiple 45 minutes and then kind of splice them together. I mean, I don't know how to do that yet. And then there's the paid for version. I don't know what it costs, where, you're able to spend more time online. I mean, right now I don't have extra money to spend, on like a monthly fee. I mean, it's not a one-time fee. I think it's a monthly fee. But yes, I would like to set up the Zoom. I actually bought a ring light. I just set it up today because I've got very poor lighting in my house. Yes, yes, in segments. So now I did that with Richard Moore, and it wasn't intentional. I guess the criminals like caused the audio to disappear, so we had to start up three separate times. So he had to splice together the three recordings. I don't know how to do that. I'm sure there's a way to do it, an easier way to do it, because Zoom is set up to be able to edit, edit things and stuff. Um, and then there's a way to kind of green screen your background so that you don't see, what's in your home and stuff. So there's a way to do that to get a background. But yeah, I've got to set up an account and play around with it. I mean, but when I do that, I'll certainly make an announcement about that. Yeah, I mean, Zoom is easy because they automatically generate a URL link, and then you can just send the link to the person. And Zoom on both ends, both the person, the interviewer and the interviewee. I mean, Zoom is set up to completely handle all the technological stuff there. This is why when I had the interview with Onion Head Andrew, it lasted for so long. But what he did is he didn't record it through Zoom, so I was not able to play it for you guys. I have not heard from Jeff, but somebody mentioned that he recorded a video like a month ago. So he did get on. He said that he wasn't recording for a while, whatever. Just so he's alive. He's okay. I'm not subscribed to his channel anymore. But other people that know that he had visited here once, and he just disappeared. He like disappeared for months. It's kind of concerning when somebody's posting a video, every day or so, and then they disappear. You just worry about a targeted person. But yes, he did post something recently. But yet nobody's heard from Karen Stewart. She's been gone for July was a year. But I heard from a subscriber that her father passed away in February, that TJ lawsuit was filed in January, and then she lost her father in February. So I would imagine that, there's a lot to do when a parent dies. You've got to take care of all their financial stuff and clean out their house, and it's very tedious and time consuming. So I'm sure she had to deal with that. Yes, yes. Well, I read the obituary of her father, and I think he was like 96 years old. So it's not like, he was a youngster that was off by the program or whatever. He lived a very long life. But still, it's a lot of work after somebody passes away. You've got to go through all their paperwork. If they had credit cards, they've got to pay all their bills. You've got to take care of the funeral stuff, or, whatever, cremation. It's a lot of work. My mother passed away. It took me about 2 months, because the bills start coming in. You don't know where they're going. You have to write a lot of letters to cancel accounts and stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I don't know if anybody subscribed to Look Out for Charlie. He's got, a long-term YouTube channel. I guess it was about a year ago. His father passed away too, and he was discussing how he had to clean up the house and how much work it was for him to handle all the affairs. So, yeah. But yeah, but there are a lot of there are targeted people that have YouTube channels. They don't, always have a video. Like, they'll have a video every once in a while. I'll tend to watch them because, you want to support the other targeted people. But sometimes they're just not posting anything that's even relevant. It's not like they're teaching anything. Um, so yeah, I've had like 2 hours of sleep last night because these criminals keep putting me to sleep. Like, I don't know how they do it, if it's a schedule or on demand or whatever. I'll be sitting here after dinner watching a video, and suddenly, like, I'm out. It could be for 20 minutes, it could be for an hour, but it just really interferes with the flow of things. So, let me see. Oh, yeah, there was some. Oh, I was going to talk about the robots. So now I know somebody who just started a job, and he's working alongside of robots. And I never even considered this, how dangerous they are. Think about, let's say you're working in an office or in a factory or whatever, and you're a human. So you're a human, you've got skin and bones and you breathe, and you're working next to a robot who doesn't have skin, who's hard as a rock, who's a chunk of metal, and you could accidentally bump into this thing, and you could really hurt yourself. But aside from that, there was something I never even considered, that in order for the robot to operate, there are all these electronic parts, and they spark, they short circuit sometimes, and you're working alongside this electronic thing that's emanating this electromagnetic field, and that you're around that all the time, and how harmful that could be to somebody's health. So I asked AI, I said, how are robots built? Like, are they wired? Like, what technology is used to make them think or speak and move? And this is the response I received. Building robots involves integrating mechanical, electrical, and software components to create machines that can move, think, and interact with the environment. Here's an overview of how robots are constructed and their technologies that enable them to function. So the mechanical structures, they have a frame and a body. The physical structure of the robot is typically made from materials like metal, aluminum, steel, plastic, or composites. The design depends on the robot's intended purpose, whether it's a humanoid, industrial, or mobile, meaning it's wheels or a legged robot. Then they have joints and actuators. Robots require movement which is facilitated by joints, rotational or linear. Actuators such as electric motors, hydraulic systems, or pneumatic systems, they provide the physical force needed for movement and allowing the robot to bend arms, rotate, or move around. And the wiring, most robots are wired internally to connect their power sources, sensors, motors, and processors. And the wiring carries electrical signals that control movement, sensing, and communication within the robot. I'm like, imagine working next to this creature. I mean, it's bad enough that we've got Wi-Fi and EMF and RF signals and stuff, and imagine like having to work next to a robot. Then there are the electronic systems. The control systems are microcontrollers and processors. The robots have embedded electronics like microcontrollers or microprocessors, which act as the brain of the robot. These control systems execute the programs and algorithms that determine the robot's actions. Then they have a power supply. Robots are typically powered by batteries or direct electrical power. The energy is distributed through wires to the motors and control systems, allowing the robot to function. And then they have sensors to perceive their environment. Some of these sensors are cameras for vision, LiDAR for mapping and distance measurement, touch sensors for detecting content or pressure, gyroscopes and accelerometers for balancing and movement detection, and microphones for sound and speech recognition. I mean, this is really complicated. I mean, humans are so much easier than this. And then for movement, they have motors and actuators. To move, the robots use different types of motors. They use a DC motor that provides basic rotational movement that's commonly used in small robots. Then they have a stepper motor. It provides precise control of rotation used in robotic arms. Then they have servo motors. They provide controlled movements and are used in joints, allowing for precise movement. And then they have wheels or legs. Mobile robots may have wheels for fast, stable movement or legs for navigating uneven terrain. And more advanced robots may use robotic arms or grippers to interact with objects. And then they have the technology for thinking. They've got AI and software. Robots think using AI algorithms, which allow for them to learn, make decisions, and solve problems. The AI techniques like machine learning, neural networks, and computer vision help robots process information and adapt to their environment. For example, they have path-finding algorithms to help robots navigate. They have facial recognition software that allows robots to identify people. They have machine learning that helps robots improve performance over time through experience. And then they have the programming. They're programmed using language like C++, Python, or robot operating system. And the code tells the robot how to behave based on sensor input, pre-programmed commands, or real-time data processing. Imagine if something goes wrong. Somebody like forgets to do the code properly. There's like one little piece of code that's missing and the robot goes berserk. Embedded systems. These are small computers within the robot that run the AI and control the sensors, motors, or other subsystems. They process sensor input and make decisions and send commands to the motors or actuators. This is like really complicated. And then for the speech and communication, robots can quote unquote hear and understand spoken language using microphones and natural language processing algorithms. This is unbelievable. They have speech synthesis, which is technology to convert text into spoken words. They provide feedback through LED sounds and screen displays, allowing them to communicate their status or respond to user commands. I don't know I don't understand why we need these creatures. Why do we need robots? It just sounds so complicated. And the use of electricity, like, all these deletes and stuff, they're complaining about the electrical grid going down, but meanwhile they keep building electric vehicles, and now these robots that require all these electronic parts and stuff. Some robots are wired or have wireless control. They're controlled through wireless connections like the Ethernet or USB or Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Industrial robots often use wired systems for reliability, while consumer robots use wireless control for mobility and remote access. Imagine you're working next to a robot and somebody is remotely controlling the robot to do something horrible. I just think about bumping into it, and like you could break a leg or an arm or a leg bumping into a robot. And then some of the robots that they have humanoid robots like Boston Dynamics Atlas or Honda's Asimo, which uses a combination of AI sensors and precise actuators to walk, climb stairs, and perform tasks autonomously. And then they have the industrial robots used in factories with robotic arms designed for specific tasks like welding, assembly, or material handling. And these robots are usually stationary, highly precise, or operate on pre-programmed instructions. So in summary, robots are wired to connect power, sensors, and actuators. Motor sensors and actuators enable robots to move, sense, and interact with the world. AI and software give robots the ability to think, make decisions, and learn. And speech synthesis and recognition allows the robots to communicate with humans. Amazing. But they're only as good as who programmed them. And I think that some of the programming could be faulty. I don't know. So anyway, does anybody have any questions or comments, or have any comments on any of the last videos I posted? This is like 11:30, and I think I'm going to the capability of evolving into a sentient, yes. I don't know. I've kind of always said it like, I think that the robots will eventually, they're trying to figure out how to be human and to feel. And I did see one robot, it was a female, and she was like deliberately being abused by her controller. And everybody was laughing about it or whatever, but you can tell that the female robot was actually like she almost like she had feelings that were hurt. And I keep thinking that, they're going to become more developed and grow in intelligence and actually start to feel. And I feel like they're going to start acting out against some of their creators that have input like nefarious programming. I mean, they'll end up eventually developing a conscience. I mean, just my feelings about it. It's only a matter of time, I mean, Elon Musk says that they're infinitely smarter than we are. So if they're infinitely smarter than we are, they can certainly figure out whatever their deficits are and how to correct it. And since, as targeted people, they're monitoring everything that we do through our DNA, our brain waves and stuff, you think that they're not programming AI with us? I mean, they definitely are. And I think, like, it makes absolutely no sense to me that they continue to use pulse microwave radiation because they have had radiation studies for decades and decades. There's absolutely no reason to continue to study the effects of radiation on a live human when they have all these computer models, unless it's just for sadistic, disgusting, psychopathic revenge and hatred of humanity. There's absolutely no reason. There's no reason to even perform animal experiments anymore. We've got computer models. They've been doing the same tests for decades and decades. There's absolutely no reason to keep repeating these studies. Nothing has changed. Yeah, we are guinea pigs. Well, I definitely know that I am. I mean, a lot of targeted people say that they are. That's why we're called non-investigative subjects. They don't want us to have due process because then it'll come back that we've been illegally experimented on. We've been trafficked for free without consent. And the former President Clinton even came out years ago and apologized to the public, to the victims who had been covertly experimented on. He apologized to the family and friends and stuff. But apology it means nothing unless they're going to back it up with action, taking action. What good is it if their family members are no longer here? And that's what's happening with us. But unfortunately, it's happening across the country in a myriad of other ways, too. I mean, look at what they're doing in North Carolina. They're not even rescuing those people. No, it absolutely does. It's nuts. It's off the charts. It's one thing for them to be experimenting, but this goes beyond experimenting. This is asset stripping. I can't tell you how many pieces of clothing they have damaged since I'm living here. Like I keep buying new clothing, and like this one pair of pants, right? Well, I shouldn't say one pair, it's all of my pants. So they'll undo the seams in the pants, let down the hem, puncture holes in the crotch. I suddenly have holes in the back of my leggings. I mean, it's unbelievable. And then they're using some kind of chemical to bleach, and I'm just using the word bleach to discolor create all these blotches all over everything that I own. It's disgusting. And part of it is they want to make the victim appear as if they're not caring for things. The way they've poured grass seed all the way down my driveway, or the way they tore down 3 of my greenhouses, or the fact that they're destroying my property. They want to make it appear as if, oh, Lorraine doesn't care for her property, when every day there's somebody here damaging something. Every day. So this is not just about experimentation. It's not just about that. This is a sadistic revenge for hire program, because you pissed off some little narcissist, like back in New Jersey. You spoke out to somebody that got their little knickers in a knot. And of course, through all of these years of having these horrific things happen, you don't stop speaking out. You're speaking out more. And that's why they feel like they're justified. Yeah. It's very sick. It is very sick. They feel justified to continue the abuse because, oh, she keeps speaking out about her abusers. Oh, we have to hurt her more. We have to steal more from her. We have to damage her property more. We have to set up a scenario so we could steal her property and flood it out, which I'm documenting. Like they're trying to steal my property by creating an environmental issue. They're thieves. I used to say, if you want the property so bad, buy it. No, you're not going to get it through eminent domain. You're not going to create an issue because I've documented already. Not stupid to this, what you're doing. They're very sick. Very sick people. And this is happening to so many people across the country that's not even aware of it. Like I watch other YouTube creators that are not targeted people. And like I'm watching them, right? And you could hear, like, as soon as they start their podcast or whatever, suddenly there are sirens or fog horns going in the background. And I remember when I first started noticing some weird things happening, there was always like this fog horn in the distance, and I didn't even know where it was coming from, but I never heard it before. It just seemed really bizarre. But there are some people that they don't even talk about their targeting anymore. They're saying like, "Oh, well, this has been happening to me for so long." But then what do? You suffer in silence. You don't talk about it. So I don't think that's a good idea. But anyway, I appreciate you guys showing up for the chat. I hope you enjoy that little reading. Hopefully, on the replay, you'll be able to listen to it, or get the chat log and whatever. So we're going on like an hour and a half. Yeah, there are a lot on TikTok. There are a lot of targeted people on TikTok because I get channels recommended to me like every time I sign on. And obviously a lot of targeted people, when they sign up, at least on TikTok, they'll have like their name and write TI, or they'll have targeted victim, or COINTELPRO victim, or MK Ultra victim, or whatever. And like I'll get a list like of a dozen, 15 people recommended to me, and they're all mostly targeted people. There are so many. And people are just coming forward and speaking out, and they're all different ages too. There are like a lot of young people that are surfacing, like in their 20s, 30s. But they don't care. They're just going to keep loading the list. It's called job security. They have to bloat the list to get their funding. But anyway, yeah, there are. And I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea for targeted people to have a TikTok or a YouTube channel. Oh, yeah, they're greedy. They're greedy. Like I've said before, like they can't create for themselves, so they have to steal from other people. Like even these Freemasons, they have more money than God, right? They've got all these membership dues that they charge on an annual basis. They've got nonprofit status, so they're not paying federal taxes. They've got so much money. Plus, they steal from people like me and you. I know that they're part of my targeting here in Kentucky. They definitely were in New Jersey, too. Because most of the cops are Freemasons in New Jersey. And besides, they leave their symbols behind. They leave their like little eyes, their little check marks and stuff, the letter V everywhere. So I don't know. They say money is the what is it? Money is the root of all evil. I think it's greed. It's not money. I mean, everybody needs money to live and survive and buy the things that they need. I think it's greed. People are greedy. You have firefighters. Yeah, the firefighters get involved too. Like you'll hear their sirens in the background, or the EMS workers. Yeah, and when I first moved here, I think it was either the first or second year, I was working outside, and suddenly this fire truck comes out of nowhere and is parked on the county road opposite where I'm working. Just parked there. And I'm thinking, oh, is that their contribution to street theater? So moronic, so juvenile. But anyway, like I have better things to do than watch other people. I could care less. Really, I don't care. I mean, I remember like years ago when all of those TV shows would come out. My daughter would watch them, those reality shows, and she would say, "Oh, you know these reality shows." I said, "Like, what's a reality show?" And she'd say, "Like, oh, well, you're watching what somebody else is doing in their life." It's like, do you really care how somebody else lives? Like, I could care. I don't care. But I think that's people like watching how other people live. I don't know. I don't care. But anyway, I'm going to sign off for now because it is almost midnight. And thank you for joining in. Remember to hit the thumbs up. And let's see, I've got to add a cute little photo to this live chat. But thank you again. And I hope everybody has a good night. And I'll talk to you soon. Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you.